So, how's everybody? Feeling okay? How? Well, curious, what it feels like, or how, maybe, how to feel really free, like inner freedom. When we know we have ideas of outer freedom, usually pretty dumb. But what does inner freedom really feel like? How do we, what is the experience? Where does it come from? Can you remember or recall? Maybe it happened just now. Maybe you're experiencing it. Experiences of having a real sense of freedom, clarity, just that peace. Can you recall? And where and when and how and why? Maybe you can't, because maybe it's just really ordinary or unexpected. Or maybe it's from a lot of practice. I don't know. But it's something we should probably be asking, is how can I achieve lasting inner freedom? Shouldn't that be an important daily question? I mean, we ask a lot of questions, what's for dinner? But do we ask how can I be really free today? How can my mind be at peace, and how can I be open and really aware? Those questions, it strikes me, should be asked, and maybe you do ask them. But I know for myself, I don't ask it enough. And I think if I were to ask it more often, I would experience it more often. If I had it in my mind more, that I really want to be calm, collected, concentrated, and free from suffering and at peace with my life, maybe I would have more of that. So, I'm inviting you to ask that question frequently. That's why we come here. I mean, we come here to talk about freedom. It's not why we come to an evening like this. How can we be more free? How can we share that with others? How can we live in a more free and loving way? How can I be less burdened by my problems? How can I be wiser in my choices? Isn't this why we come here, or why we do anything that is, we think, helpful? Seems to me. And you have certain wisdom from your experience that lets you know that certain things, environments, and practices do cultivate and encourage that more. And certain environments and practices do that less, take it away from me. Yeah. And being able to tell the difference between the two sides. Most things are not neutral. Most of the time we are encouraging certain attachments and aversions, and we're putting ourselves in environments that are triggering those things, or we are working on how to let go of those. And letting go is the key term for tonight. Yeah, this is because I'm thinking I'm going to talk a bit about Ajahn Chah, which you guys sat with last Shabbat, I guess, in the desert, the 100th anniversary of his birth. And he has this famous saying that if you let go a little, you get a little peace, and if you let go a lot, you find some, like a lot of peace, and if you let go completely, you complete peace. So, it's not even about like finding this desert environment where you can have peace, because I'm sure when you're in the desert and it seemed like you had everything taken care of, there is still a lot of like attachments and aversions that will come up. Cold, hard ground, whatever, right? And the complaining mind. So it wasn't even really about the cold, but the cold triggered like this habit I have of always complaining and finding fault with my life. All the time, no matter what. And it's not just about a difficult environment, because we're experts at finding difficulty. Like there's dukkha, sure, but you'll be in a beautiful place and you'll find something missing. It'll be too beautiful. So you can't even let go of the beauty, because then the beauty becomes attachment, and then you start worrying about, oh well, this vacation is going to end. So even when you're in a beautiful place, the vacation is going to end, you start to have anxiety about, oh, what should I do before it ends? And oh no, the end is approaching. So even the good, we turn bad. What habits we have of the mind. And it has nothing, we know it has nothing to do with our experience. Like the outside is not the cause. And so the Dharma suddenly turns it inside out and says, well, okay, so the cause is the inside. And that's where your work is going to be. Do you know the habits of your mind and how your mind is imprisoning you? That your source of freedom is not the outside. Take responsibility for your mind. Can we do that? It's actually pretty disturbing, isn't it? Because it's so easier to blame somebody or something. It's just so comfortable to say, bad weather. Never mind other people, okay? Don't even go there. And the letting go here then is a letting go of all external causes for my happiness and suffering. Right? Does that mean I don't, try for anything? I should just be, I don't know what. Just like have no aspirations? Not at all. Not at all. But the aspirations are not for the sake of your own personal happiness. It's less about you. Why? And this is where, if we want to understand Ajahn Chah and the whole process of letting go, the ultimate letting go is letting go of self. Right? Is letting go of self. And then when you let go of self completely, so when he says like letting go a little, you have a little bit of freedom. Meaning you let go of yourself and your habits and your likes and dislikes. You let go a little bit. It's like, yeah, okay, so it's cold, I can deal with the cold. I'll let go of it. And remember, you don't let go once. You're letting go like every second. Right? That's also something to remember about letting go. It's not like, okay, I'm like okay with the cold or the hard floor. Right? I wasn't even there last week, so I'm just, pretending I know. I couldn't handle it.
No, you know.
I couldn't deal. So, so you let go a little, but is it letting go of the conditions? No, that's not it. It's not saying, okay, I'm letting go of like cold or of my likes and dislikes of cold. I'll let go of not liking cold. I'll let go of not liking cold. Let go of not liking cold. But why do I have to keep letting go of not liking cold? Because I'm not letting go of the right thing. We have to get to the root, okay? The root of attachments is the mistaken idea we have about ourselves, who and what we are, okay? the real question we should be asking is not just how can I be free, but who is this I that wants to be free? Who is the I that is so wanting to be free and so wanting not to suffer? Who is this? Who's even having this thought? Do you ever ask that? So I said in the beginning, you should be asking, like, how can I be free? How can I be free? Break up the sentence, right? There's like, so what is freedom? That's a good question. How is a good question. And then, I? Like, who's the I that wants this anyway? And what is the wanting? What is the desire there? Right? I want to be free. Each one of those words is begging to be asked, what? What is this? What is freedom? What is wanting? Okay? And what is I? Right? Not even who am I? Because who is already saying like it's a pronoun. It means that there's like a subject there. Ask the question more basic, like what? What am I? What am I really? Did you ever go through and you kind of explore, like, what am I that is so, I'm so concerned about? I'm so obsessed, naturally, with me. God, most of my day is spent thinking about me. And what's going to be good for me, and what's going to be bad for me, and how I can get more of the good and get away from the bad. And it's all about me. Without even asking the question, well, what is this me anyway, and who am I? If we start to explore that, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, what do you find? Really, what do you find? Just, that's actually what meditation is about. Meditation is not just about being mindful. Okay, being mindful is good, right? But you can have a strong attachment to the self and be mindful. And then you're using your mindfulness to reinforce your sense of self. I am a very mindful person. Serious problem there, right? If you have to get rid of one thing, being mindful or me. Right? So how does this relate to our sitting? Because this is really, where we are exploring not just, our experience, but who is experiencing? Who is experiencing this? Who's hearing? Who's thinking? And who's having these thoughts that are so important to you? And who's judging it that they're important? You ever just step back and say, well, where did that judgment come from? Who judged? There's no answer here. That's the thing. Because if you could give an answer, then you'd be able to locate that source. And one of the main teachings in the Buddhist understanding of self is that you just won't find it. You won't find it. You look, we say it's like the rabbit hole. You just won't find it. No? And why? Because as soon as you look, it's changing. And I said this yesterday. I said, we say, self is impermanent, so therefore, where do you find the self? And that's all very facile to say, meaning it's easy. Until you'll consider that for most of your life, you have been feeling like the same person, haven't you? Isn't that weird? All this nice teaching about non-self, but hey, you ask somebody who's 80, 90, and they say, I still feel like the same guy or girl I was when I was 20. and my body didn't cooperate. But it's still me. How do you have this continuity of self-sense, let's put it, so that you can still identify it's you? How does that work with the teachings of non-self, anatta, non-self? Kind of odd, isn't it? I mean, you still have, you know it's still you, don't you? And you can remember, it's not just your memories, but try to locate for a second this sense of self that you have. Just like locate it. It's not even your name, it's just like, you know who you are, right? You have a certain sense, a certain feeling, a certain awareness of me. Right? Or you, who you are. And it's been pretty stable, hasn't it? Like throughout the years. You've had your ups and downs. Okay? But ever since you were a child and you had self-consciousness, you've had this sense of self and you've added a lot to it. You've matured and you've developed tastes and likes and dislikes and education and languages and fields of expertise. Great. But the basic sense of who you are has continued, right? So isn't that odd? How do we understand that with the sense of that there is dukkha, right? We understand difficulty. We've gone through a lot of difficulty. But that there's impermanence and there's non-self. And these three characteristics are what describes a Buddhist understanding of reality. Well, here's one of the things that we don't take into consideration when we have this sense of self. That it's a pretty vague sense. It's pretty vague, right? It's like a general sense of self, and then you can answer a lot of questions if I ask you questions. Okay? But how closely, really even scientifically, like how closely have you looked? Right? Have you spent time practicing? And this again is what our meditation practice is about. It's not just relaxing and enjoying the flow. No. It's examining very closely that flow. Right? What do you find when you look? And that's where we start to understand just what this self is like. Not just my general sense of self that, yeah, Daniel, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever, 100. Not there yet. But, I'll have the same sense, yeah, I can still say it's me if I'm sane, right? But then when I start to ask, okay, well, what is you? Who are you? What? Have you really looked? You won't understand impermanence in a general way. Impermanence is not a general idea. Non-self is also not a general idea. And letting go is also not an abstract idea. It's specific. It's moment by moment, looking closely at your experience, fearlessly, looking into the face of it and seeing, whoa, this is what it is that I like, that I don't like, that there's phenomena happening moment by moment, and it is different. If you don't notice the difference and the change, you haven't been looking. Okay? You've been gazing, right? But gazing is what we do with the horizon, right? Examining is what we do in meditation. So you have to cultivate a strong concentration, which is samadhi. Samadhi concentration is that close looking, right? But looking not for an answer, looking just to look. Looking for the sake of looking. And then from that naturally comes the insight, what's called vipassana, of impermanence and non-self, right? We don't, it's not another identity, okay? It's not another sense of self. It's exploring the nature of the self. And if I just say, yeah, it's impermanent, that's a general answer. Specifically, though, how are you viewing it? How are you observing it? And this is where the practice is really key. Yeah? You have to be very focused in meditation. It's not just, I'm going to pass some time now and the bell will ring. Yeah? You've missed it. I mean, it's relaxing. It's good. It's better than, I don't know, watching TV. But, depends what the program is. But, you're not getting the insight that this practice is about. And without that insight, you will not be able to let go. Right? We're letting go of our attachments and aversions that are based on trying to reinforce or protect a sense of self. The attachments are the way I want to reinforce it. The aversions are the way I want to protect it from threat. Now, why do I do that? Because I have a false belief in a permanent self. And it's not permanent in the sense that this vague sense of Daniel going along all these years. No. It's permanent in the sense that I feel that it hasn't really changed. Right? And I'm believing that illusion because I haven't looked really closely. Meditation will allow us to look closely, and in that understanding, we gain freedom from our, futile efforts of always wanting to protect or, strengthen something that is an illusion. That's letting go. Now, it takes practice. I want to read one quote I have a few quotes from Ajahn Chah. And I was going to read a few of them. Just to give background on Ajahn Chah, for those who don't know, he was a Thai master who, was born 100 years ago, died in 1992. And he introduced and created, he was the first person to create serious monastic places of practice for Westerners. Right? So basically he was a person who introduced meditation to the West in a serious way. Right? There are people who went to the East to practice in some traditional Zen and Thai and Tibetan monasteries, but as an organized kind of approach, he was the one who started these international monasteries for Westerners. And basically from that time, the first one was in 1975, I think, in Wat Pah Nanachat. And from that time, everything that has happened in the West with Vipassana, what we call Vipassana or insight meditation, came from there, came from that. And that has pretty much become what we know of as meditation. So, the influence has been vast. I think I read that at his funeral, there were 1 million people, including the king of Thailand. So he was not just famous with Westerners, but also the Thais. Anyway, he was considered a really amazing master. And here's an interesting kind of aspect of his mastery and teaching. That for the last 10 years of his life, he was paralyzed, he had a stroke, and he was wheelchair bound. And for most of that, he was unable to talk. And before he lost his speech, he was emphatic on reminding his students that his illness and death approaching is, his final teaching. Okay, that was his final teaching. Right? So you had this master who was just like in a wheelchair, paralyzed and silent. There he is. He's practicing for you. Now, the other thing that's kind of funny is that some people, and I've heard this in other contexts, where some people say, well, if he's such an enlightened master, then how could he have a stroke? Like, couldn't he control the blood flow in his brain or something? Slow it down and, for the sake of other beings, just stay alive?
Why is it funny?
Why is it funny? Because it's funny. First of all, because it doesn't work that way. That's why. It didn't happen. It's funny because of what we think meditation does and what we think enlightenment is and what we think, being on a spiritual path is going to escape suffering in a physical way. No. It is about transforming the mind so that you can be paralyzed and still be enlightened. So, is that possible? We'll see when we get there. Whichever wherever you end up. But we should learn from him. We may not be paralyzed, but we're gonna get old and we're going to get sick. Or we're going to get sick and get old. They're both going to happen. Which one first? The age will bring sickness or the sickness will bring death. Whatever. It's going to happen. Okay? What is your mind going to be like when that's happening? What is your mind going to be like? Right? You know that's going to happen with your body. I guarantee it. Right? I can say with 100% confidence that you're going to die and it's not going to be fun. Okay? It's probably going to be painful. And if it's not painful, you're not going to have much awareness because you're going to be on morphine. Okay? So, you're going to die. It's going to be difficult. You're going to get old. That's also, well, it depends. But for most people, it involves a lot of loss. Either the loss of your own physical abilities or the loss of the people you love. Because you're older than they are and they die before you. Alright? So, it's no matter what. Now, if you can't control that, what can you work on? And don't wait. Don't wait. Right? Practice on transforming your mind and letting go of your attachment to your body while your body is still healthy and strong, and if you're young, young. That doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy your youth and enjoy your health, enjoy your beauty. Enjoy it. But can you enjoy it with non-attachment? Knowing that it's going to end. And not panic because of that. If you don't practice letting go now, you are reinforcing the mental habit of attachment. So, if you wait, it just gets harder. Alright? We know this. We just know it. So, the other reason I laugh about that approach with people who are enlightened and get sick and die is that we tend to impute a certain level of magic to meditation or spiritual alignment. And we tend to think that, okay, well, then it must involve some sort of supernatural abilities. Or they're natural, but like only an enlightened person can realize that. Okay. Maybe. Maybe not. But that's not our concern, is it? Our concern is your mind, my mind, your body, my body. Right? That's what we need to work with. Let the enlightened people do their own thing. Right? Your job is to suffer less in this life. And if you get there, then you can tell us about it. Right? Share the good news. For the time being, though, you can't count on being able to bypass the heart attack, stroke, or cancer. It's coming. Right? It's good news because it means that we won't be surprised. Right? You're not going to be surprised. Practice now. I I remember one time when it was around the first time when I did my first couple of retreats, and I was up at Tushita in Dharamsala, and one of the big lamas there was dying. Like he was dying, but in a really terrible way. I don't remember how, but the nuns who were taking care of him, these Westerners, they were talking about like emptying these, like all the blood and stuff, and there was just this gory, which was really gross. And but it was unpreventable. Like that was, it was their practice, it was his practice. He was dying in a terrible way. That was like, they were telling me matter of fact that they are cleaning the sheets of blood like every hour. I'm like, wow. Okay. Hi Lama Rinpoche. He's gone. And it's bad. Okay. And I kept that, like, he's, that image in my mind, and I've heard it in several times of, these Lama Yeshe. He was also this very high Tibetan Lama. And he died in America surrounded by his followers, and he started this whole, movement. And at the end, his respiratory and his physical decline was so dramatic that all he could do was lie in a hospital bed, like hooked up to, all these sort of respiratory and blood machines. And all his life, he had practiced, to go through the bardo and to go through the, transition and to be totally clear. But he was just surrounded by all these beeping machines and in a hospital room. Not the most conducive environment. Now, have you ever hung out in a hospital? It's a challenging place, right? So many machines. And people on carts and noise, and it's like, And so his students asked him, okay, well, what's your, what are you going through now? What is your practice? What did he say? He said, I'm following my breath. That was like all he could manage. Total pain, distraction, all of it. So like the High Lama is following his breath. So if you can faithfully do that now, then hopefully when your time comes, you will faithfully be able to do it then as well. So the forest tradition that Ajahn Chah tried to create for Westerners, he was part of it, and there was a revival happening. Ajahn Mun before him, and these Thai masters in the past 150 years were recovering this very amazing tradition that went back to the Buddha. This time, and it went back to this. I want to just quote the Buddha where he said, "Bhikkhus." This is the quote from one of the sutras of the forest tradition, and this is the sort of the source that the forest tradition comes from. It says, "And how bhikkhus does a bhikkhu is a monk, establish mindfulness? Here, a bhikkhu goes to the forest, or to the root of a tree, or an empty hut, and sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, sets his body erect, and establishes mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful he breathes in, ever mindful he breathes out." That's the establishment of the forest tradition. You want to know
It's repeating many times. The Buddha talks a lot about seclusion in forest in many sutras.
Yeah.
It's not only
It's only
Satipatthana, which is
yeah, I know. In the Satipatthana, the mindfulness of breath, right? But it's Anapanasati, mindfulness, body, breath, the teachings of mindfulness. It's said over and over again, and it's true. The seclusion, you go to a forest, sit under a tree, an empty hut, and place your mind on your breath. Now, for this Lama, we should remember the hut was the hospital room, okay? And for you, it's wherever you choose. How do we invite this as a practice into our lives? So, there's some metaphors that Ajahn Chah used to use, and the metaphors are helpful. There's a well-known metaphor of a still forest pond, where you're sitting in the forest again, and your mind is this pond, right? It's the pond, and then all sorts of animals come to it because it's clear and it's still, and they take a sip and then they leave. Now, what's nice about that metaphor is that when you're sitting in your mind as this reflection can settle and become clear and still, it doesn't mean nothing's happening. He says all sorts of strange animals come, but then they go. They take a sip and they go, right? So yeah, they come into your mind, they create ripples. Try to really think of the metaphor that an animal comes, what does it do? The lake is no longer still. The animal disturbs it. There's some ripples, okay? And then the animal goes and it returns to the quiet. You have stuff going on, right? All sorts of interesting, ordinary animals and strange exotic ones. They come and they disturb your mind. They do. They disturb your mind. Okay. 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 Having a mindful life does not mean you won't be disturbed. It means you can return to the calm very well. Okay? Skillfully you can return to that calm. And the next animal drinks, and it ruffles you, it ripples the surface, and you return to the calm. Right? It's not about stopping the animals from coming. Those animals might be a car that cuts you off, somebody at work or school who offends you, some relationship or conversation, or just like a red light, or they didn't have what you needed at the supermarket, or whatever it is, or the bank, or all endless stuff. You stub your toe, you cut your finger, you on and on. It has rippled the surface of your calm, clear, reflecting mind. So then it no longer reflects, right? During that moment that it's all like ripply, you're not seeing clearly anymore. That's also just what happens. And then you come back, you pause, okay? You don't get involved with the animal. This is the important thing. Don't get involved with the animal, because the animal will then jump in the water, splash around, try to get away from you, or try to come close to you, and the water will be totally muddy and messy, right? Leave the animal alone. All right? Just leave it alone. It'll do what it does, and it'll leave. But if you don't leave it alone, okay, it'll start getting nervous and do stuff. Okay? The other metaphor he used is he talked about a cobra. It's like dealing with a cobra. Dealing with your thoughts is like dealing with a cobra. I love that. It's like snake. This big snake. Imagine that someone left the door open. Just imagine. I know it wouldn't happen in Tel Aviv, but it could happen if you're like somewhere. They used to go to sit in the forest and sit in the middle of the forest as a sort of trying to deal with their fears. Because these forests used to have sort of, maybe they still do, wild animals that could eat you. I'm sure they still have snakes. And they'd sit there and they'd have to deal with their fear. Now just imagine if like this cobra or snake or something, what's the one, Cepha or something you have here? Yeah.
Viper.
A viper comes in and is like, what would your reaction be? You'd scream and run, and you know what happened? The snake would bite you because you got so, upset. You upset the snake upset you, and then there's like a war going on now. Okay? It just, increases so fast that somebody's going to get hurt. And it's going to be you. Now he says just let it go. Like, what do I mean let it go? Letting go means that I'm not going to start disturbing and getting involved with this snake. It's like, I'm very aware there's a snake in the room. Right? You start running around, shouting, screaming, what's going to happen? Right?
Since you're from Canada, does it also work with grizzlies?
Depends if it's a black one.
Grizzly bears. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first of all, look, it's actually a good question. Not because I'm ever going to meditate where there are grizzlies. I'm not going to go where there are grizzlies. That's number one. You don't go where there are grizzlies. But if you happen to find yourself where there's a grizzly, you take precautions. Again, remember how I said, like, where you notice your attachments and aversions are increasing, you take precautions to avoid those situations, and you try to go to places that are safer so they won't trigger that. So even before I enter into the grizzly zone, right, I'm going to take precautions perhaps not to go there. And let's say I can't help and I have to go there. Then there's other things that they tell you to do, like on the camping sites. You have to tie your food in like high up. You don't keep it in your tent, right? You tie it away from where you're sleeping, and you tie it above so that they can't smell it. And there's like precautions that you take, okay? You don't wear strong smells, those types of things. So there's all sorts of things that we do in order to, guard our awareness. Right? If you know that something is, you're inviting trouble, like you're just inviting it. Right? If you know that there's certain things and areas and situations that trigger my aversions or attachments, we're old enough. We have enough experience to know. And if you don't, then you better slow down and learn. So we know these things. If you're a recovering alcoholic, you don't rent an apartment on the same street as a bar. You just don't do that. Right? So whatever your addiction is, you don't put yourself until you've trained well enough to really let go of that next door. So with the grizzly, and then let's say grizzly comes.
You can just pretend to be dead, like meditating lying down.
Yeah. Well, there's two things they actually say, and actually with grizzly, that's one of them. If it's attacked you, that's when it's attacked you. Okay, when it's attacked you, yeah, you play dead. Who could do that though? Can you imagine trying to play dead with an animal sniffing around you, like its snout like on your face, and just wants to eat you? I mean, I can't even think about it. But
maybe you need to want to be alive.
You need to want to be alive to play dead. Yeah. And you have to be very, very mindful of your fear. Your awareness of your fear has to be tremendous in order for the fear not to push you to do something that will kill you, right? So in that situation, you know, someone who's not mindful. Look, many people do get eaten and killed, right? Because they can't play dead, because they're not aware of just how strong their fear is. And here's the thing, like, what is the fear telling me to do? It's telling me to run away. But if I run away and get up and move, that's going to kill me, right? So like what my common thought is going to actually do the opposite of what I want to do. So how do I overcome that fear? Is by being so aware of just how strong that fear is. You know, awareness will save your life.
You send the grizzly metta.
Grizzly metta. Send the grizzly metta after. Yeah, yeah. After, you'll have lots of time to practice metta with the grizzly. But even before, when they also say that when the animal is, you know that there's an animal around, one of the techniques they also say is to make a lot of noise to scare it away. Like you gotta make a lot of noise, bang drums, like shout, scream.
Be really big.
Act big, like you're bigger than it. Yeah, just shout and scream and stuff, and then it kind of, wasn't expecting that, moves away, knows you're not a deer. Now, that is also, I mean, if we're trying to use that as a metaphor, right, for our practice, our daily practice, which is not dealing with grizzlies, but it is dealing with things that may seem to really be too much for, like, it's too much for me, right? If it's too much for me, then, yeah, sometimes I need to, you know, like, shout and scream and get out of there, right? To just save my life. And what life is it? It's your precious inner life that you're trying to cultivate, the sanity of not being a crazy individual. What do I mean by crazy?
But then you
Is this a good time to ask what am I when a grizzly is chasing me? I think to me it emphasizes the importance of awareness and mindfulness. Because awareness makes you give up, let go of automatic reactions.
Yeah.
Situations like this, or when there's a fire in the theater or something else. In many cases, especially extreme cases, awareness and mindfulness, that extra second of being just reflecting of what's going on can be helpful in making the right choice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Although he was telling it, Ajahn Chah's story, I mean, to learn something else, but I find a lot of value in mindfulness and practice.
Yeah.
Not just in hospital beds, but also kind of various complications in life. When something surprises me, and my natural inclination is to do this, but then then a minute of reflection sometimes can be very, very helpful.
So true. So true. Yeah. You know, there was this this story that I read about this one in the Buddhist time. There's this ascetic, this guy, he was a fisherman. Normally it's called the Bahira Sutra. And there's this guy named Bahira who he was a fisherman or something, and he was shipwrecked, and he fell out of his boat was destroyed, and he ended up crawling onto shore, and he was naked, and he had nothing, he'd lost everything. He crawls up to shore, and he's covered like with dirt and leaves and stuff. And the villagers who live nearby, they see him and they think, well, somebody who looks like that must be a holy man, right? Because he's like, looks like an ascetic, you know? He's just covered with like dirt and leaves. And later on, so he kind of like went along with it because it got him fed. And then he ended up meeting some disciples, students of the Buddha, who said, you know, like, you probably should just go check out the Buddha. Like, go meet the Buddha. I mean, he's like alive and in the area. So go. So he was like, okay, I'll go. And like there's only so long that people can treat you like you're enlightened, and you can fake it, and then you start to wonder, what would it actually be like? So he went to the Buddha, and the Buddha didn't want to talk to him. He kept saying later.
Banya.
Yeah, kept saying later, later. And finally, this man said to him, look, he came to the Buddha and said, I can't wait. You're going to die, and I'm going to die, and one of us will die before the other, and it'll be too late. I won't get the teachings. And the Buddha was impressed by that one insight and that sincerity. I said, okay, I'll give you a teaching. And here was a teaching. He said, in the seen there is only the seen. And in the heard there is only the heard. In the sensed there is only the sensed. In the thought there is only the thought. This, Baya, is how you should train yourself. When you do this, there is no you in connection with all of that. When there is no you there, and there's no you here, or there, or between the two, this, just this, is the end of suffering. That's pretty amazing. This is the end of suffering. What was the end of suffering?
No self.
Yeah, it's when I'm not always finding myself in all of my experience and seeing it as like, yeah, this is good for me, this is not good for me, this is good for me, this is not good for me. Yeah, this is what I like, this is what I don't like.
But I'm curious about this, talking about the self, because I find that rather than wondering if there is self or there isn't self, etc., I find that actually getting to know the self is really useful for that liberation. And the more you get to know yourself, the more you can accommodate for those patterns and conditions and all the whatever made you the way you are. And that's for me like a gateway to free up sometimes. So I guess I think I got the same idea from what you said as well, like you really want to get to know the self, because the talk about is there is self or there isn't self is almost, it's too abstract.
Yeah, and that's important to point out, that we're not talking about, the question is not, is there self? Is there not a self? Or it's less about even about self. What we're saying here is that if you want to realize selflessness, it's not by looking at self. There's nothing to look at. It's by looking at your experience. All of this mindfulness is bringing us back to the seen, the heard, the tasted, the felt, the smelled, the thought. The thought.
But then you're going to see patterns.
Yeah,
You
so?
will see it again and again, and that's actually useful to acknowledge that there are patterns and there are conditions, and that's what it is. That's it.
Yeah, but there's nothing behind that. It's like there's brown and there's brown. I see a pattern. Brown. Yeah. Honestly, I see patterns. I identify colors, and there's blue. I got to know blue through my experience. And I got to know that the mind also has certain patterns, but that pattern is not any more significant than blue. Right? So, if I can come back to Lama Yeshe's breath, to my own, what I see, what I hear, what I smell, what I think. There's this, I mentioned last night, there's this book by a Buddhist psychologist, Mark Epstein. It's called Thoughts Without a Thinker. Now, thoughts without a thinker, okay? It's useful. It's a useful consideration. You're having thoughts. There are thoughts going on. What's behind the thoughts? the thinker? Yeah. What's behind it? What's behind the thoughts? Where are the thoughts coming from? Be mindful of the thoughts. Is there anything that you're mindful behind the thoughts? No. There's just thoughts. Okay? There are sounds. They're just sounds. Just doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It means there's nothing behind it. There's no, big plan. Okay?
This is a book about Donald Trump. Thoughts without a thinker.
Thoughts without a thinker. Maybe he's just, the whole thing is.
It's even about Obama. We need to balance Satan sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, does that mean there's a Buddha in the White House? So, which is that true? Yeah. Vote for Buddha. So here's something else another metaphor that I want to finish with Ajahn Chah. The one that I like even more than the pool. It's called still flowing water. Still flowing water. Like self, non-self, right? Self, non-self. Still flowing water. Have you ever seen flowing water? I'm reading him. Have you ever seen still water? If your mind is peaceful, it'll be just like still flowing water. Have you ever seen still flowing water? There. You've only ever seen flowing water and still water, haven't you? But you've never seen still flowing water. Right there. Right where your thinking cannot take you. Even though it's peaceful, you can develop wisdom. Your mind will be like flowing water, and yet it's still. Wisdom can arise there. That is the trust you need to have. I talked about trust in the second meditation, and it's the trust that in the flowing water, there's the stillness of your wisdom, of the depth of simply what you are, not who you are. Can you trust that? Can you sit with the flowing water and realize the stillness? Can you realize stillness and appreciate and observe the flowing water? Can you see the unity of the two and not prefer one over the other? Still flowing water. That's simply what you are.